Welcome to the session called Athletes and Abuse. Some very important topics and stories you'll hear today. My name is Howard Brown. I'm your moderator. I'm sitting outside in the suburbs of Detroit, Michigan. And with us today are Dan Murphy from ESPN, Health and Safety Mondays. Jessica, I hope I pronounced your last name correctly, Ogonarin.
Yes,
yeah, did all right, close enough. Okay, from Level 8 and VCU women's basketball. We've got world champion and Hall of Fame gymnast Marcia Frederick with us as well. And fan favorite for me, Theo Fleury, played in the NHL. And I'd like you to all start, and we'll basically start with you, Dan, just to give a quick introduction and about yourself and what your main topics are that you want to cover.
Yeah, thanks, Howard. I'm glad I get to go first. I'm far less athletically talented than the rest of our panel. My sport playing days ended in high school, which is when I started writing about sports more often. And right now I work as an investigative reporter at ESPN, covering a variety of topics. But over the past 3 or 4 years, a lot of my time has been spent covering abuse in sports, whether it's at the college level or the Olympic level. And about a year ago, that culminated in a book that I co-wrote along with one of my reporting partners named John Barr about the Larry Nassar case in U.S. gymnastics. So since then, I've also covered a couple other doctors in sports, as well as coaches and others that have been caught up in abuse scandals in sport. And, I think, to me, I came to this topic as someone who is not very familiar with the best practices or the way to view the impact of abuse, or the best practices of how to handle the trauma that comes along with abuse. And so I was able to learn quite a bit along the way doing that reporting. And I think the things that stand out to me that I'd love to get into with this panel as we talk and get some questions on are how important the education and awareness piece can be, how much that can change the equation for a lot of people, how much it changed the equation for me as I was able to spend months and months learning about what causes some of these things to become chronic systemic issues and abuse, things that are hard to root out, and how that can be solved with education and awareness quite a bit. I think one of the other things that I found that was incredibly important is one of the system of enabling that allows abusers to persist much longer than they otherwise would be able to in sport. In covering the Larry Nassar case in the book we wrote, we identified more than a dozen people that had an opportunity to stop him over the course of 20 years or so of abusing his athletes. And for one reason or another, they didn't. And what stood out to me the most in seeing those things was that be hard pressed to find any of those people that really woke up fully understanding what was happening and turned a blind eye to it out of just, kind of an evil intention of knowing that, not thinking it was important enough. What happened far more often is that people heard complaints, heard warning signs, and ignored them for a variety of reasons, whether it was placing their priorities in the wrong place and kind of losing track of what's truly important, as well as just, I think that there seems to be among people that are generally good people in sport, there's a way that it seems a lot of people bend their minds around to try to find a less egregious or less evil explanation for the thing that they're hearing when an athlete tells them about abuse, or when a victim tells them about abuse. And it causes you to kind of try to find a way to explain something away rather than addressing it head on. So one of the things that we found was most important time and time again in these cases was that eventually somebody came along who started from a point of assuming what they were hearing was actually accurate, and of believing that the person was telling them the truth. And just that small act, and starting from that place and working from there, can be a huge game changer and a huge difference. And the last thing I'll say that I think we took away most, and I've seen the most from being able to cover a handful of these cases at this point, is how contagious the courage to speak up and say something is. That I've spoken to survivors of abuse who have told me that other survivors that I've spoken to in the past that they had no connection to inspired them to speak up. And once you see that there is a community out there that will support you and help you carry that pain and help you and say that they believe you and kind of justify what you've gone through, it can be another huge game changer. And I think in terms of what athletes and sports and people like who would attend this conference can do to try to help solve this problem, finding ways to put that support community in place sooner, and finding ways to get people comfortable in speaking up is such a huge piece because it can open floodgates pretty quickly. And we've seen that across multiple different sports and obviously other parts of society really in the past few years. The reckoning that's come in abuse has been huge, and like I said, it can be a very contagious thing. So I think finding more ways to encourage people to speak up, but also to make sure that the support system is there when they speak up, so that one, it has a good impact, and two, that their needs, their mental health is taken care of during that process is maybe the most important next steps, I think, in trying to solve some of these issues. But yeah, I think
Wow, Dan, they just, I mean, I'm just trying to process everything there because very impactful opening, and for writing your book and doing that investigative reporting and letting those voices be heard is so important. I'd like to move to Jessica for your opening remarks as well. Thank you, Dan. Powerful.
Thank you. Thank you, Dan. First, I would like to say that I'm thankful to be part of this. I think that, the time for change is right now. So I'm just happy that we're here and we're part of this positive action. Um, I was a former athlete. So I was a former athlete in a Division I institution, a former basketball player. And I would like to start by stating this quote that was mentioned in the previous panel earlier today. And this was by Matthew Lawrence. And he said, if he could do one thing today for a better tomorrow, it would be to show the poorest people in the country that they are needed and that they matter. And how do I bring this into this conversation? Um, I'm Greek Nigerian. I was born and raised in Greece, and I'm coming from a single parent home. Um, my dad left when I was 3 months old, and my mom was left alone with three kids in a country where she did not know anyone. And we experienced extreme poverty. And I also experienced 11 years of sexual harassment. So at the age of 17, I moved out of my home, and I moved out thinking that staying in a different location would help me escape those realities of my home. Um, but soon I learned that just running away from those experiences or being in a different location did not change what was going on inside of me. So at the age of 17 and a half, when I received that letter of intent to go to a Division I institution on a full scholarship, I signed my part and I signed my mother's part. My mother and my family never saw that letter of intent. I was ready to just leave and run away. So to me, my scholarship was an escape, was freedom. So part of me going to the institution that I went to was because I had a Greek American head coach, and I was thinking that, yeah, I'm in a different country, but I'll be with a coach that speaks my language, so I'll be able to integrate faster and we'll be able to communicate. And what I thought would be a benefit um, for my education evolving as a player became a curse. And during games or during practices, when I would commit a turnover or make a mistake, he would tell me things like, you deserve to be sexually harassed growing up. You deserve for your parent, your dad, to abandon you. And it was not just the fact that he was telling me those things, it was also the fact that nobody else understood because he said those things in Greek. So moving to 3 years later, because I did spend 3 years in that institution, I faced a series of concussions. So I had three concussions in a matter of a month. And after every concussion, I was talked into and forced to come back to play. Um, And it was after that third concussion where I just sat down on the basketball court thinking to myself, I don't feel right. And when is this whole situation going to end? So I went home that night. I woke up the next morning and I just had no control over my body. I made my way to the training room, and then out of nowhere, I was just experiencing shortness of breath. I was hyperventilating, I was trembling, stuttering, all these symptoms that I had never faced before. Um, with the insurance that I had as an international student athlete, I wasn't able to see a neurologist for another 6 months. So I bounced around from doctors, and at the end, they prescribed me with narcotics. So I was prescribed narcotics. I would take it 3 times a day. I would wake up, eat, maybe talk to my family for 2 or 3 minutes, and then go back to sleep. So I got to this point where I was taken out of basketball, I was taken out of my job, I was taken out of school, and I was just constantly home. And as I was taking those narcotics, I was losing my ability to carry out daily activities. So, with the help of my supervisor from my job, that was totally clueless about how the NCAA works, right? We had this idea of starting a fundraiser. And I started a fundraiser on a Friday and mother to help me out. And by Sunday, I had gathered all this money. So I was excited. We're about to get this ticket. I will finally see a family member. I get a call later that day from my coach, and he tells me that you are a disgrace to the program, you are a disgrace to your teammates, and I made a mistake to bring you in this country. At that moment, I felt like I lost my meaning of life. When you come from a background, a challenging background, or underprivileged background, you don't realize that failure is a notion that doesn't really exist. You don't realize that failure only happens when you stop trying. So at that moment, thinking that I'm not going to have a scholarship was equal to failure. And like I told you earlier, every single year I debated transferring, but I didn't. Because when you also come from a difficult background, you think that moving on or transferring is a form of giving up. You're not, you're just taught, you just brought up in a way that you have to survive and you just keep pushing and pushing and pushing. So the next day that I had a meeting with my coach, I was scared. I hadn't communicated this to my mom or my family or anything. And I felt lost. So 10 minutes before my meeting with my coach, I overdosed on all the narcotics and all the other pills that I had available to me in my apartment. I met with him. I was just crying and trembling, and he was just telling me that I'm a disgrace, I'm a mistake, and that I'm gonna drive myself crazy. And I walked back to my apartment and I just blank out. Um, the next thing I remember is waking up at a hospital and everyone is just excited because I had woke up from a coma. And I'm sharing this with you, and I have to share this for multiple reasons. Number one, because I have to give hope. Um, you have to own your story and you have to be transparent with your story in order for you to stop somebody else from getting to that point. That's the first reason why I have to share this story. The second reason why I'm sharing this with you is because change is needed now. And the reason why change is needed in the college environment is because you have all these kids coming from all kinds of backgrounds that see their sport as the only thing that gives them value. And when these kids are put into environments where mental health is not important, or they're in front of transactional coaches, the result can be detrimental. Me being here is a miracle, but I don't know. We don't know if the next kid will make it through a coma. We don't know if they're going to wake up through a coma. So for me, the reason I'm here today is for us to find answers, because it's harder to control where the next student athlete will land. But what we can control is possibly implementing or developing a program, a mentorship program that will help the student athletes face those problems that they're trying to run from. Take away that mentality of their sport being their coping mechanism. Just finding a way to deal with what's going on and realizing that their value and their self-worth is beyond their identity as an athlete. So that's really why I'm here, for us to figure out a way, answer questions, see how see what we can do to start this destigmatize mental health, seeking help, you know, kind of put a stop to this transactional form of coaching.
Jessica, thank you for your testimony. You are so resilient and brave. I want to climb through the screen and get a hug and give a hug. Thank you for sharing that opening. Amazing. Thank you. I think each of these stories are meant to really make us feel the impact of other people's journey and walking in their footsteps. So with that, I'd like to move to Marsha Frederick, our U.S. World Champion gymnast and Hall of Famer. Can you take yourself off mute, Marsha, or I should do it? There she goes.
There you go. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
My name is Marsha Frederick, and at 15, I became America's first female world champion in gymnastics. By the time of my 16th birthday, I had already begun to be groomed by my coach. And for the next 2 years, even though I was world champion, for the next 2 years, I was sexually abused by my coach. By 1980, I had become an Olympian during the year of the boycott of the 1980 Summer Olympians. And at that time, I told everybody in authority what had been going on with me. I had told my other coaches, I had told the owner of the gym, I told my parents, and I was met with absolute silence and really zero response. And I'm here today to help people become more aware of sexual abuse in sports and not necessarily know the whole story, but I can certainly share more of my experience with people, and I would like to be able to do that here. I also am one of 9 women selected to represent the over 500 Nassar and non-Nassar abuse victims currently in litigation with USA Gymnastics, as well as the United States Olympic and Paralympic Committee. I'm also a gymnastic coach. So I'm here to educate and hope bring people forward on certainly my experience, but other experiences. And I'm here to make sure, at least in the gym I'm in today, that this is not going to happen to another gymnast. Thanks very much for having me.
Marsha, thank you. And thanks for being here. I'm just at a loss of words of the silence that you spoke of. And we are going to dig deeper in the second round here. Theo Fleury, please, oh, you're unmuted, so please share with us.
Yes, geez. So from the age of 14 to 16, I was a phenom hockey player in Canada with dreams and aspirations of becoming a National Hockey League player. And I ran into a coach and a scout who basically promised me a one-way ticket to the NHL if I listened and followed his guidance. And over a 2.5-year period, he raped me 150 times. And what I was left with was a lot of shame, a lot of guilt, a lot of anger. And there wasn't one person in the world that I could have told. Because first and foremost, I knew if I would have told, first of all, I wouldn't be believed. And second of all, I knew that that would be the end of my hockey career. And having grown up in a home with my dad was an alcoholic, my mom was a prescription pill addict, so I grew up in a lot of chaos and violence and complete insanity, that hockey was my happy place. And whenever I was on the ice, you know, that's where, you know, I got everything that I wasn't getting at home. And so I went on to have this amazing professional career, the whole time being a very high functioning alcoholic and drug addict. And eventually, you know, my mental health issues, depression, anxiety, panic disorder, I could no longer manage any of that. And in 2003, I got kicked out of the NHL because I couldn't stop drinking. I couldn't stop doing drugs, and my behavior was completely out of control. And then 16 years ago, I had a fully loaded pistol in my mouth, ready to pull the trigger to end my life, not because I wanted to die, but because I was completely exhausted from living in emotional pain and suffering. And I tried everything on the planet to get rid of it. And then in 2009, I wrote a book about my life where, for the first time, I actually told the world what actually happened. And by doing that, I found the absolute true purpose for my life. And that was to help other survivors of child sexual abuse come to grips with what had happened to them. And I work extensively in the field of trauma, mental health, and addiction. I've done over 800 speeches in the last 11 years talking about trauma, mental health, and addiction, because they all go together. They all live in the same house. They're not separate. And yeah, I'm honored to be here, and I'm always willing to talk, you know, about this subject, because, as you may or may not know, the most successful business on the planet is what? Child and human trafficking. It is $150 billion industry. So Amazon, which is the most successful company, made 87 billion last year. Child and human trafficking made $150 billion a year. So this, any type of abuse, is the biggest epidemic on the planet. It's bigger than COVID, because as we've seen more opioid deaths and suicides than actual COVID deaths. And the reason why people gravitate towards that is because of trauma backgrounds. And, you know, we can talk about systemic racism, we can talk about all that stuff, but the biggest thing on the planet is systemic trauma, which all of us carry with us. We all have it. And in my experiences, we haven't created a safe space for vulnerability, because what happens is vulnerability creates safety. And then when we have safety, that's when the magic of healing happens, is when people feel safe. But we, you know, I fight through stigma every single day doing the work that I do. And, you know, that's what we have to fight every day but we need more vulnerable people, like people on this planet who are on this panel, who, you know, are willing to talk about their experiences. Because my experience has been, every time I've told my story, somebody in my audience has come up to me and said, you know what, thank you for telling my story. And, you know, you're the first person I've ever told this to. And so, you know, it's really, these type of panels are essential and are incredibly important in getting the message out there. Because, you know, when the Catholic Church has to talk almost every day about sexual abuse, you know, we see what happened at Penn State, we see what happened in Hollywood. You know, this, like I said, is the biggest epidemic on the planet. And I've been around for almost a half a century, and I have not run into something that is more significant and needs our attention more than whether it's physical, emotional, or spiritual abuse, it doesn't matter. That is what we're facing, you know, as we move forward. So thank you for allowing me to be here, and thank you to each and every one of you who shared your story, because I believe that that is such a huge piece to the puzzle here.
Just, I'm just having trouble. I'm trying to digest the amount of what your lives have been through and understanding. I'd like to just take this back to Marcia for a second, because Marcia, this what was happening to you as a teenager and in the early '80s. Can you share a little more depth than how you survived this? How are you able to come through and heal,
Well, I
or
think,
still try to heal?
yeah, I think I'm still in the process of processing, not so much what happened to me. I was just 16, as I stated, when my coach started grooming me. I was also America's first world champion. And the picture that I have representing the ID here on Zoom is actually a poster of me at 16 years old. And I had tried during the year and a half, almost 2 years of the abuse. My coach was also a dorm parent. And his access to me, well, let me start. I had moved away from home when I was 12 years old. And I went and lived in a dorm for gymnasts, which was just right across the driveway from the gym itself. My dorm parent, my married dorm parent, was also my coach. And his access to me obviously was very easy at that time. So the abuse went on for 2 years. And though I had tried to leave many signs for people, no one really picked up on it. Shortly after the 1980 boycott, I was just 18. That's when I told everybody in authority, or everybody I knew that I thought could help me. And what really affected me then, as well as today, was what I feel is the complete abandonment of the people whom I thought loved me and cared for me. So for example, I told my father at 18 what happened to me, and my father and I are estranged is not even the word. We just don't speak at all. He pretty much ended my relationship with him at that moment when I told him what happened. And I believe they could not process, but also let me go. And I deal with that type of abandonment and silence to this day. And I work through that.
Thank you. I want to ask Jessica now, where are you at right now, and in your process of taking your life back, healing, others supporting you, your family?
Um, I think Marcia made a great point. It's healing doesn't stop. It's a continuous process, and as much as we're learning more about this, and vulnerability is something that just came to people's attention. It's just now that people are actually accepting the fact that vulnerability is not a weakness. So I still struggle with um you know accepting what happened to me, trying to understand why, but what keeps me going and what helped me was the moment that I started sharing my story. Um, because the biggest thing for me, I have this picture, and I'm not sure, I just learned about this. It's called highly functional depression, where basically you're doing everything looks good on the outside, you're performing to your highest. So I still was a starter, I was a great student, I was the most positive person on the team, but inside of you there's a war. So I had this image of this very positive person, and it was hard for people understand that I needed help because I wasn't showing that I needed help. And coming from where I come from, asking for help was a form of weakness. So what really helped me share my story, and I started sharing my story and what really happened and why I really transferred from my first institution last year in November. And that's where I met Mr. Roy, because the same coach that was mentally abusing me was now being investigated 6 years later after I left the institution. So for me to hear that 6 years later there were still players going through that, I said I don't care anymore about how people see me. I will share what happened because some of my old teammates were telling me, Jess, you have to let people know what happened. We're waiting on your story. We're waiting on your story. And we think that once your story is out, they will let him go. So I just literally, sat by a church and make this hour-long video where I just stated everything. And for me, the moment I woke up from my coma, I'm not gonna sit here and lie to any of you guys. I wasn't happy because I was thinking that I have to go back to that. Um, but with some counseling and during those sessions, I realized that my purpose is bigger than me. And at that moment, I'm like, I went through all this and I overcame this. So there is a reason I overcame it. And since then, I basically tried to do all I can to share information that can stop somebody else from getting to my point. It took me it took me 6 years to open up about this. And what if I had opened up about this 6 years ago? Because the thing is that even when I transferred from that institution, I never told anybody that this is what this person told me. This is how I felt. This is how he was threatening me during practice. I just said our philosophies didn't match. Because for the same reason that Miss Marcia mentioned, when I spoke my truth to my family, it's like people have a hard time accepting. They're in denial. So you're thinking if your own family denies your truth, who will accept it? But then, just like Mr. Theo said, you have a conversation, you share one thing, I write one blog, and then you get one response of somebody saying, thank you. I felt this way too. Your emotions are valid. And then you keep going. So it's an ongoing process. And some days you have good days and some days are not that good, but you get that text from somebody and you keep going.
Try to help others. I thank you for that. I'm going to come to you after Dan. I want to go to Theo next because I have to tell you that I only recently learned of your story, and I only knew you as this amazing, the fastest guy on ice, great, player, and to learn that you still were able to, as Jessica said, perform at such a level, carrying this huge baggage. I'm just struggling here now, just seeing how did you carry on? I mean, I guess you took to drugs and alcohol, but I mean, you played like a champion. I mean, I'm really trying to reckon how you did it. That was for you, Theo.
Sorry, I'm on mute.
Yeah, no problem.
I subscribe to the Malcolm Gladwell theory of 10,000 hours.
Yeah.
So when I was a kid, from the time I started playing, which I was 5 years old, until 15, when I left my hometown to pursue my dream, I put in 10,000 hours of practice. So when I stepped on the playing surface, I never had to think. And my sport's a reaction sport. And so if you got to think about where you're supposed to be on the ice, well, you're going to be in big trouble because the puck moves faster than I can skate. And so basically I didn't know what I was doing. All I was doing was escaping, the chaos and the craziness of my home life. But what I actually did was I trained myself to react. And so it didn't matter what kind of shape I was when I showed up at the rink. As soon as I put on my suit of armor and those two pieces of steel on my feet, it's where, like I used to say, the ice was like a blank sheet of paper, and I got to write a story on the ice 3 periods every night. And so, my focus was not what was happening away from the rink, but when I was on the ice, I was able to really focus and enjoy myself and enjoy what I had worked so hard to achieve. But, what people don't understand is that, those of us who've experienced extreme abuse and many layers of it, we're in therapy for the rest of our lives, and I believe that sexual abuse is like a living murder because it destroys your soul. It completely destroys your soul. It completely destroys everything you thought that was good about the world. It destroys all of it, right? And we're left with a feeling of I'm not good enough and I'm not lovable. Okay. And the road back is as hard as a road as you'll ever take. It's even harder than the actual abuse that happened, is unpacking all of this trauma, unpacking all of the layers attached to it, cleaning up the wreckage of our personal past, relationships and kids and friends and all that, all these people that you have hurt because of your own behavior. There's so many layers to it. And I'll be honest with you, I struggle every day with mental illness, every day. Depression, anxiety are, sometimes debilitating. But, like Jessica said, there's a higher purpose here, right? There was a reason why God picked me. And, like I said, what I'm doing today pales in comparison to what I did on the ice, because this work is the most important work that I'll ever do in my whole entire life. And I know that I'm not alone. That's for sure. 1 out of every 4 people that walk the face of the earth will have some sort of unwanted sexual experience before they turn 18 years of age. And so, thinking that I was the only person that was going through this, and then having come up with my story and realizing that not only am I not in the minority, but I'm in the majority, right? And that's the message that needs to get out there, is that, you aren't alone. This is common. It's not uncommon. It's very, very common. And, I just take life one day at a time. I try to make it 24 hours at a time. That's it, because that's all I got, And they say, if you think about the past, that's depression. And if you think about the future, that's anxiety. And so the goal is to try and live in the present moment as much as possible. And that's not an easy task, because our brains are sort of Velcro for negativity. And it's part of our survival system. And they say it takes 5,000 positives to undo 1 negative thought. And so, living in the moment, living in the present is, the best kind of healing. And, you can use all different kinds of tools, meditation, yoga, breathing exercises, all that kind of stuff to sort of keep you. Mindfulness is another thing that's really helped. But yeah, helping is healing. That's the mantra. And the more people I help, the better I get. It's just that simple, and it's not rocket science. It's putting yourself out there. It's putting your story out there, and hopefully, it connects to another human being who's struggling, who, has problems and issues and all of that. But, the one relationship that I neglected the most in this whole entire process was the relationship that I had with myself. And once I started to have a relationship with myself, you know, things significantly improved, you know, over the course of time.
Thank you, Theo. I'm thinking back to you guys as teenagers, and Jessica, you know, Marcia, in the 80s, you actually, you know, there was no cell phones. The internet was just coming alive. So Dan, I want to go to you now because of your taking on the project of really shining a light on the Larry Nassar situation and hearing the testimony we just heard from these brave and courageous folks. Getting the word out and making people aware is really, really important. When you took on this project, tell us what you went through to basically gather the info and be able to present it back in your book.
Yeah, I mean, it was a responsibility that I think both of us took very seriously, and it didn't take very long to understand what kind of a responsibility it was when you have, you know, we probably talked to in the course of our reporting probably at least 40 or 50 survivors of sexual assault, and in that book, and then, you know, several others for other stories after that. And one story that will always stick out to me is talking to a woman who ended up being one of the main subjects in our book, named Rachel Den Hollander, who was one of the first women to come forward to publicly let people know what Larry Nassar was doing. And we were sitting in a coffee shop, and I was asking her about the long-term impact of the abuse on her, and she told me, every time I talk about this, every time I tell this story, I know I'm going to have nightmares that night. I know I'm not going to go home and not be able to sleep. I know my next week is going to be miserable as I relive this experience and this trauma. And as I'm sitting there, I'm realizing that she's telling me that just talking to me about this is going to cause this. And it's starting to sink into me the sacrifice that she's making to put this story out there and why that's worth it to her. So I think once you hear that story once, it becomes really easy to understand why this is so important. If someone's willing to put themselves through that amount of pain and trauma all over again to tell their story to you, it becomes really, there's no way not to take very seriously and do everything you can to try to amplify that story as much as we possibly can.
I appreciate that. I've been friends with Roy Kessel a long time, and I didn't realize why he asked me to be moderator of this session. And you just don't know, because when I look at you, you can't tell, as you said, Jessica, on the surface. So you guys are looking at me, and I'm wearing my Boston Bruins shirt. I'm a 4.5-year stage 4 metastatic colon cancer patient. And now I understand why Roy asked me to moderate this session. You just don't know until you take a deeper look into someone, into their heart, and into walking in their footsteps. I'd like to go back to Marcia and tell me what the future lays. I know you're a coach, and you're trying to actually prevent this happening to others. Where do we go from here specifically for you?
You mean as my personal road, or
both your personal road and where we need to go as a God, not a good time for that. Marcia, I guess I'll just repeat a second. I'd just like to know what, for you personally, because that's really important, but also, you know, what needs to happen in society.
I think personally for me, what I'm trying to achieve as I approach my 60th birthday, more peace in my life. And I'm working towards working through a lot of the issues that my colleagues on this panel are bringing forward. And I think when I help people, as well as using any platform to help people, does heal my own demons. Though, as it was pointed out again, just talking about this, it's a healing and a non-healing process. It just keeps bringing you back into the loop. As far as professionally, I want to help and educate not just USA Gymnastics, but anybody who knows of me or knows of gymnastics, how I continue to get through what I consider embarrassment about people knowing what happened to me. And I'm working through that, but I would like to see more education as far as the ability for a young child to be able to have access to information such as phone numbers and or websites that are accessible to the gym or the area that they work out or live in. I find even with many gyms that I go to, gymnastic gyms here, if you were to make a complaint as a 12-year-old or a 15-year-old, you would have to either tell somebody and hope that they are an advocate for you, or it's a difficult navigation if you go to a USAG website or a Safe Sport website. And I would like to make that information easier for a younger child to be able to come forward. And I see that as well as being on the committee to make sure that these survivors are adequately cared for, as well as myself. And just listening to everybody reminds me it could be the next child that I see. So I'm here to make life better, and I'll make myself better by making life for anybody who has ears or eyes. Uh, and I feel that's my new place in life. My children are grown and gone and got through their childhood so far without any abuse that I suffered. And that's a good thing.
Thank you for sharing. I hope that you remain an inspiration and keep healing, and thanks for sharing. And the Larry Nasser with all the other gymnasts, I hope some good and some sources of help for others and prevention do come about. So thank you for all your efforts there. Jessica, where you stand now? What's going on and what's next?
Um, I just came back to college. I'm pursuing my fourth degree in sports leadership. Leadership now, basically rebranding myself because my goal is to develop a mentorship program that will help student athletes, so incoming freshmen, to separate the sport from their personal issues. So, really learning those techniques, having access to those resources that helps them understand that it's okay to have issues. Now, let's face them and not make their sport their coping mechanism. Because when your sport is your coping mechanism, you think it's your freedom, but it's a prison because now you're accepting all types of things just so you're able to play. So, my dream, my vision is to create a program that will do that for phase one, help people face those problems, be comfortable with asking for help. And phase two, finding who they are beyond that image of an athlete, and also helping them realize that they are more than a number. You are more than the number on your jersey. You're more than your statistics. You're more than how much you have, how many things you own, your GPA. Because when you, the the hardest thing about experiencing abuse is that you get, I don't know why it works like that, but after a while you get to this point where you start to internalize the blame and you think you deserve it, and you start losing your self-worth and your value. I don't, you know, it's not your fault, but you kind of tell yourself it's your fault so you can find a solution that's not really there. And just helping these athletes realize that you're more than just an athlete. You're more than what you were born into. You are more than what you experience, and that your experience does not define you. And you can be so much more and something bigger than everything that than you experience. So my hope is that I create this program or I partner up with someone that who can help all these athletes that especially those coming from a troubled background, because when you come from a troubled background, you have a harder time moving on. You have a harder time finding your self-worth and just being okay with asking help, because you always have to be tough and tough and tough. So my goal is to help the student athletes. I don't want to hear about student athletes committing suicide. Some of them don't make it. Some of us do not make it. I don't want to hear about student athletes graduating and feeling lost because they can't play anymore. More hope, more leaders, So that's the plan. I came back to school for the fourth time. And hey, there's nothing wrong with rebranding and rebuilding yourself. So
I agree. Thank you for that. You're winning today. Theo, you're on with the crusade. So what's next? And keep going. What's going on?
Well, I'm all about safe spaces. So,
Hmm.
creating dialogue, challenging the media to, cover these stories in a different way. What was interesting when I went on my book tour, I did 300 interviews the first 4 days before I actually went out on the book tour. And the only thing that the media was interested in was the gory details of my sexual abuse. And, thank God I had lots of media training, because I realized that, you don't have to answer the reporter's question directly. And I went in with a plan and a message, because I wanted to get a story of hope and healing and recovery out to the masses, not gory details, of my experience, because I didn't want to relive, didn't want to relive it, nor did I think that I had to relive it, And the interesting thing is that by the time a pedophile gets caught, on average, he has 125 victims before he gets caught. Okay. So think about that. Think about that for a second, and it doesn't matter whether it's an abusive coach, once an abusive coach, always an abusive coach, and I played for lots of guys like that,
Go ahead.
So, I grew up in the tough love, suck it up era,
Me
and,
too.
it didn't serve me well. I can tell you that, because as Jessica said, it plays on your value as a person, as a human being, and then you suck it up and sacrifice because you want to be on the playing field, because that's the only place you feel peace, joy, happiness, love, attention, all those positive things. And so, you'll fight through tremendous amounts of adversity to get that opportunity to play, And yeah, we've come a little ways, in exposing the abuse in sports, but we've got miles and miles and miles left to go, because, you know, um, at the end of the day, college sports, pro sports is a money making machine. Okay. And when you have money, you have power. And then when you have power, then you can abuse anybody and everything, right? And so, the whole reason why the Penn State scandal ended up the way that it did, the way that the Michigan gymnastics program ended up the way that it did, was because they were protecting the money. And that's what it always comes down to, right? And the most interesting thing is, when I left the sport of hockey, I was cast away, forgotten about, you know what I mean? And so they didn't prepare us for life after hockey. They didn't prepare us for nothing. As long as you were putting butts in the seats and people were spending money to come and watch you play, didn't matter what you were doing, as long as you were performing on the ice or on the basketball court or whatever it was, they're willing to accept it. You look, Antonio Brown just signed another contract with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and this guy has a long history of trauma, right? And every time he comes into a situation, his trauma is always brought to the forefront, and he's never been able to, work on his issues while he's still playing, because they don't care about that piece. They care about the performance, and that's it. So I'm all about creating safe spaces, creating safe environments, telling people there's a different way to do this than just going the big pharma route, getting addicted to more pills and more medication and more. I've become a very spiritual human being, and that has been probably the best thing for my personal recovery, was being connected to something greater than myself. So I always talk about the spiritual piece probably more prominent than anything else, because when you're connected, and I really believe that relationship is how you heal, is in healthy, meaningful, vulnerable, safe, relationships. That's how this process has to happen. And so, we're out there creating organizations and, people who are willing to be vulnerable with us, share their stories, which then creates a collection of people who are also on the same path and on the same journey. And then when you create an advocate, so you take a victim or a survivor and you turn them into an advocate, and then the more advocates you have, the more change will happen when you have more advocates. But like I said, it's been really hard to get people to open up about emotional, physical, and spiritual and sexual abuse.
Oh, Roy, are you wanting
Yep.
to talk? Okay.
I'm
thank
just jumping in to say thank you to everybody for an amazing panel. The stories are heartbreaking, devastating. I can't imagine what each of you have gone through. I applaud you sharing the stories. I know how difficult, I can't even imagine how difficult that must be, but I know that it helps so many other victims and gets them to be able to have the power to come forward and share their stories as well. So thank you all for your time. We really appreciate that. We have another session that's going to start now. And so we just want to thank everybody for participating. Sorry about the glitch, but glad everybody came back on.
With
Thanks
strength,
very
and I'm
much.
so grateful to have been a part of this, and we'll get the word out. God bless and be strong.
Take care. Stay safe. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Please.
Thank you all.
Peace out. You got it.